Your phone says 128 gigabytes, but 40 of that is gone before you've taken a single photo. You go to update iOS, and it stops halfway because you're out of room. You check storage, and there it is, a mysterious block called Other or System Data, sometimes 15, 20, even 30 gigabytes, and Apple gives you almost no explanation for what's actually inside it. This isn't a glitch. It's real data, quietly piling up in places most people never think to check. Knowing what's actually in there is the difference between deleting your photos in a panic and fixing the actual problem in 5 minutes. Here's the thing to understand first. Other isn't one file. It's Apple's catch-all label for anything it can't sort into neat categories like photos or apps. Under the hood, iOS is tracking dozens of buckets, system caches, temporary files, app containers, message attachments, and when something doesn't fit cleanly, it gets dumped into that vague bucket. Apple designed it this way on purpose because most of what lives there is stuff the operating system needs to function smoothly day to day. The problem is transparency. You get a number, not a breakdown, which is exactly why this category feels like a black box instead of something you can manage. So what's actually filling it up? A huge chunk is caching, temporary copies of things you've already loaded so apps open faster next time. Safari caches web pages you visited. Podcasts and streaming apps cache chunks of media. Maps caches map tiles from cities you've driven through. None of this is permanent by design. It's meant to get cleared automatically when your phone needs the space back. But that automatic cleanup doesn't always keep pace, especially on phones with smaller storage tiers, which is exactly why 64 and 128 gigabyte iPhones tend to hit this wall far more often than the 256 or 512 gigabyte models. The single biggest offender for most people is messages. Every photo, video, voice memo, and GIF anyone has ever sent you sits stored on your device by default forever, unless you've set messages to auto-delete after 30 days or a year. Group chats are especially brutal here. Years of memes, screenshots, and videos compound quietly in the background. Apple counts a lot of this under Other rather than tagging it clearly as messages data, which is precisely why deleting the Messages app itself does nothing, because the app isn't the problem, the years of accumulated media attached to your conversations is. Software updates leave fingerprints too. When your phone downloads an iOS update, it stages several gigabytes of installer files before it actually installs, and sometimes those leftover files don't fully clear afterward. The same goes for apps. When a developer pushes an update, iOS often keeps a copy of the old version cached temporarily in case something goes wrong during install. On top of that, Siri and Spotlight maintain a search index of your files, messages, and apps so they can return instant results, and that index itself takes up real space, often a gigabyte or more depending on how much content is on your phone. This is where most people get frustrated because deleting apps feels like the obvious fix, and often it barely moves the number. Here's why. Many apps store data separately from the app itself. In what's called a container, think saved logins, downloaded content, offline maps, cached images. Delete the app fast through the home screen, and sometimes that container lingers behind, still counted as Other instead of being free. This is especially true for apps you've reinstalled multiple times over the years. Each reinstall can leave orphaned fragments of data that never fully clean themselves up, which is how Other keeps growing even as your actual app count shrinks. Let's kill a myth while we're here. Swiping apps closed in the app switcher does not free up storage, and it barely helps battery life either. That gesture just removes the app from active memory, RAM, which is completely different from storage space on your drive. iOS is built to manage background apps efficiently on its own. Manually force closing everything actually makes your phone work harder because it has to fully reload each app from scratch next time you open it. If you've been swiping away 20 apps every night thinking you're helping your storage situation, you can stop. It was never doing anything at all. So what actually works? First, and this sounds too simple to be true, restart your phone. A significant chunk of Other is temporary cache that iOS is supposed to clear automatically, but sometimes just doesn't get around to. A restart forces the system to flush a lot of that junk immediately. People routinely see Other drop by a gigabyte or more just from powering off and back on, especially if the phone hasn't been restarted in weeks. It's not a permanent fix if the underlying habits stay the same, but it's the fastest, lowest effort thing you can try before doing anything more involved. Second, go after messages directly. In Settings, Under Messages, set Keep Messages to 1 year or 30 days instead of forever, and iOS will start automatically clearing out old attachments on a rolling basis. You can also go into individual conversations and manually review attachments. There's a dedicated view that shows every photo and video in a thread so you can bulk delete without scrolling through years of chat. For heavy group chat users, this single step is often responsible for reclaiming more space than anything else on this list, sometimes several gigabytes in one pass. Third, use Apple's own tool against the problem. Go to Settings, General, iPhone Storage, and scroll down to Recommendations. This shows exactly which apps are hoarding data, which large attachments you could delete, and offers an offload and used apps option that removes the app itself while keeping its documents and data, so you can reinstall later without starting over. Offloading is smarter than deleting because it specifically targets the app binary, the actual program file, while leaving your data intact and often shrinking the footprint of bloated apps that have quietly grown to several gigabytes over time. Fourth, if you use iCloud Photos, turn on Optimize iPhone Storage instead of Download and keep Originals. This keeps smaller, space-saving versions of your photos and videos on the device itself, while the full-resolution Originals live in iCloud, downloading automatically only when you open a specific photo. For anyone with a large photo library, this alone can free up tens of gigabytes because photos and videos are almost always the actual largest consumer of space on the phone, even when other is the number stealing your attention on the storage screen. A few things that sound helpful, but mostly aren't. Clearing Safari's website data barely makes a dent unless you're an extremely heavy browser user. Turning off background app refresh helps batteries slightly, but does almost nothing for storage. And buying a bigger iPhone next time doesn't solve the underlying issue, it just delays the day you're back here confused again, because other scales with how you use the phone, not just how much room you started with. Here's the bigger pattern worth noticing. Apple has quietly gotten better at this over the years. iOS updates have improved how aggressively the system reclaims cache automatically, and the storage breakdown itself has gotten slightly more detailed with each release. But Apple has no real incentive to make this fully transparent, because confusion nudges people toward paying for more iCloud storage or upgrading to a bigger phone. Don't expect Apple to ever hand you a full, itemized breakdown of other. The more realistic path forward is what's already happening, incremental improvements to automatic cleanup, not a sudden fix. The real takeaway, other isn't a bug, it's the accumulated residue of how you actually use your phone. Mostly messages, cache data, and app leftovers that don't clean themselves up as fast as they should. Restart your phone, manage your messages retention, use the recommendations tool, and optimize your photo storage, and you'll reclaim real space without deleting a single thing you actually care about. If this saved you from a pointless factory reset, subscribe to News AI Daily. We break down the tech confusing you every single week.